Thanks for having me down. This is a great event, and it's really nice going after Joe on the legislative side, and after Tyler, where I think a lot of the things that you talked about are precursors to a lot of the seasonal issues that a lot of you are having. As an aside, I definitely don't need to tell you any more about me. I can't picture a harder situation now than being a club, that especially with being seasonal. I think if you're in this room, you're all seasonal, right? Just by nature of it. And Tyler alluded to a lot of it, but to find staff right now is so difficult. And in the club industry, where I've been working with clubs now for well over a decade, we also work with other industries. I also work with resorts, hotels, restaurant groups, and ski mountains. I think that you're the most limited sometimes in the sense that a lot of you are not tipping clubs. A lot of you are literally competing with people down the street that can offer a lot more in wages and tips, and frankly can pivot a lot faster. They don't have to go through a board. It's really difficult right now. A lot of the stuff that Tyler's doing is awesome, because we need to start working on getting people back into the industry long term. And I think that that's really where you're focusing a lot of your energies on, because this is definitely a systematic issue. So what I'm going to do is I get to do two things now, because I wear two hats. I am not only an immigration lawyer at Pabian Law, but I also started this other company during the pandemic called Seasonal Connect. And so I get to see a lot of the staffing things. So Tyler talked a lot about more of the higher level managerial roles. I'm going to talk more about the line positions and the hourly ones. And as all of you know, it is so hard, right? I know I'm preaching to the choir. But it's a long-term problem. What's scary right now, and I'm sure a lot of you are hearing this, is the hospitality programs are struggling to attract people right now. People left the industry during the pandemic. They're going more to the gig economy. One thing that's been interesting is I was speaking at a conference in Florida a couple of months ago, and some of there's starting to be some companies that are replicating kind of the Uber and Lyft model of doing the gig thing. What's scary is they're finding people, right? So like, for example, there's a hospitality gig type thing where you can have people come in and work events. They're finding workers. Now, to get those same people to come in and help with being a seasonal server or even a year-round server or a line cook, that's where it's really difficult. So people are leaving the industry in droves, and I think that it's really challenging to get them back, especially when you're limited by, needing to put them into your system, have them work nights and weekends and work so many hours during your busy season. Now, in terms of the biggest issues from what I'm seeing and hearing when I'm going to conferences, when I'm going into meetings with clients, recruiting, I think, is first and foremost, right? No one can hire, let alone get applicants, or let alone get people to even show up for an interview. Wages is huge. Tyler talked about this, but the wage game is so competitive right now. Retention is really difficult. A lot of people, I think, feel like they're just looking for some changes in their life and are trying to just see what else is out there right now. Immigration hurdles, which I'm going to touch on. Competition from others that can offer things that you can't, right? And this is where, I was at another conference in Arizona, and one of the general managers was saying, we need to meet them where they are. We need to say, it's okay if you just want to work nights. It's okay if you just want to work during the week. But then another general manager was saying, but what about our existing staff? Because they're just going to fall on them to work some of the shifts that they don't want to work. Finding those people that want to spend their careers doing some of the hourly roles at your clubs. Perks don't seem to be as important. I think when people are able to get wages that are so much higher, that kind of does away with some of the perks. And COVID has certainly been a huge issue and continues to be one. As hopefully we're past some of these variants, but the Delta variant was no help. Now, in terms of ideas, right, it's really difficult to say the least. But in terms of what I'm hearing other clubs and other hospitality organizations doing, there's starting to be this movement towards paychecks the same week that they start. I think that's harder in clubs, but I think this is what is helpful to hear of what you're up against. A lot of other industries are starting to pay people the week they start and get cash in their hands. Bonuses to sign on and stay on. Now, this is hard, and this is where you can't always make people happy. What some organizations are starting to do is pay people to sign on, right? Like a sign-on bonus. The problem is, when you do that, it sometimes makes people upset who have been working for you for years. And this is where you need to really be very careful with how you're doing this. Referral bonuses, I think, are huge and are a great idea. It's harder to make people upset when you do that. Food for workers and their families. One of the things that all of you have the opportunity to do is you have a kitchen. And what I've been hearing some organizations do that I think is a nice idea is like they'll do a family dinner night once a week and say, we're going to let you take home food for a family of 4 for dinner and help you that way. What I've heard from some of the places that have done that is it's been a really easy way to make people happy and show that you care and help with some of the cultural initiatives. Reaching out to different organizations like the AARP, the retired community, communities with disabilities, the people coming out of incarceration, things like that can also be good. The problem with those is that you kind of get here. It's not a comprehensive solution. You kind of get a handful of people if you're lucky here and there. Building housing can be helpful. I will tell you this: if any of you have the opportunity to build staff housing, or if you're building a new golf maintenance facility or something like that, put employee housing in. It is going to make your life so much easier, and it's going to allow you to be so much more competitive in different avenues that you're pursuing. I was talking to one of our clients in South Carolina, and one of the department heads has been trying to urge the board to buy this plot literally next door to the club, and they won't listen. And I guarantee you they're going to be kicking themselves over that in 5-10 years from now. Offering benefits to seasonal workers, I think that potentially could be where things are heading. I know a lot of you have tried not to do that, and I don't blame you. But as we're going to talk about, being able to staff for the season is so helpful, and anything that you can do to attract and retain those seasonal workers is huge. Some of you are getting really desperate though. So one of the ideas that I've heard, which I do not think will work, is like running shuttles around to different areas and trying to pick people up. And I think that realistically part of the problem is that it's not that people are struggling to get to work, it's that they don't want to do the jobs right now that you need them to do. And so the problem is when I'm hearing some of these, we'll either call them creative or crazy solutions, I don't think that's getting a lot of the organizations very far. I think you could spend that money either on raising wages or doing some other things that are helpful. Teaching and training is huge here. And don't lose sight of this. What I've been hearing, when I've been talking to a lot of the HR consultants that work with clubs and hospitality, one of the things that they are saying is that because the recruiting market is so difficult right now, a lot of you have forgotten about your existing staff. Don't lose sight of them. They are your best referral sources. They are the ones that are going to help you get through this. The more that you teach and train and help to foster that environment and that cultural environment internally is going to get you through this. Seasonal Connect, I'm going to talk about, it actually is a solution, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, I always go into this here. It is so difficult right now that in reality, the only way that you're going to get a large group of people in this current today environment is if you go down the international side. I think otherwise what you're doing is you're really trying to put Band-Aids on a really gaping wound right now. And so what I'm seeing, what the industry is seeing, what the country is seeing is that more and more clubs are going towards the international worker side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you an update on what's happening from an immigration side. I'm going to put on my immigration lawyer, my Pabian law hat for a moment. It's so hard, but it's so hard, but it's also where when it's successful, you get people. Okay. So immigration law is so difficult for hospitality. I was talking to Joe when I got here, and I was saying, even under Biden, it's funny. As an immigration lawyer, a lot of the people in my field, and I'm saying this apolitically, we were so excited when Biden got elected, and the 4 years under Trump were hard from an immigration law standpoint. Under Biden, though, it hasn't frankly gotten that much easier. It's not as hectic, or it's not as many fires, is probably the right way to say it, but it hasn't gotten easier. And where we are still is a pretty closed immigration system, especially when it comes to hospitality. So, where we are today is there's essentially two good options for clubs from an immigration standpoint when you're turning to foreign nationals. You have the H-2B visa, which is like a workhorse visa that I'm going to tell you about. Then you have this J-1 visa that can be really good for a short season, so it's kind of good for like a 4-month summer. And then you have these year-round options that on paper look really attractive, but are really hard to get. I would say every year it feels like they get narrower and narrower. And I always said, immigration law, nothing's changed, I think, since like Bush was president. But the problem is immigration law has so much discretion for the officers that they can make it change pretty drastically, even though they're using the same laws. And since Bush, who's actually pretty positive for immigration, every year it feels like it's gotten narrower and narrower of who qualifies for year-round visas. The system was definitely created for technology, for institutions, for education, science. It wasn't made for hospitality, and that's what we're seeing. So when we get clients that need people year-round, essentially what we started doing a few years ago, and is pushing them towards considering permanent residency, which is green cards, and keeping them here in the meantime on H-2Bs. Weirdly, it's easier to get a green card for someone than it is a year-round visa at this point. So it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it's so difficult, and the uphill challenge is huge. So in terms of the H-2B, when the H-2B works, it is your best friend. You can get it for your entire season. You can get it for up to 10 months. But in reality, you apply for your season. So let's say your season runs from April or May through right around now. That would be what you apply for. It's based on the job category. So you might apply for servers, for dishwashers, for line cooks, for golf maintenance. And you get to set the requirements of the position. So you could say that we require 3 months of serving experience in a high-end place, or you could even say in a club, and that's totally fine. There's a lot of requirements, but most of them you're already doing because you're in such a compliant industry to begin with. It is a cost to the club, though. This is something that the government sees as an employer benefit, so you would need to be paying for the fees for this, including the travel of getting people here for the start of the season and potentially back to their home country. It's an annual process, which is good and bad. It's bad because you go through it every year. You have to go through all the paperwork, you have to pay for it. The good thing is you can make tweaks to your year. So you can change positions, you can change the number of people you need, you can change your days. So there is some flexibility involved, although there's a giant but coming in a few slides. When you get to the very end of the process, you get to make a choice, potentially, depending on how you do on this lottery again that I'll talk about in a few slides. You can either bring people in from outside the country, or you can transfer them to you. So they might be coming to you from Florida, from Arizona, from ski country. And that's called an in-country transfer. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of the H-2B. Think of the H-2B as your workhorses. Okay, it's a visa that's designed for people to come in and work hard and then leave after your season's over. The J-1 is different. Okay, and it's never been more apparent how different it is than during COVID. But the J-1 was designed as a cultural exchange visa. Okay, it was designed for people to come to the United States after graduating from college or from a university, practice something that they've learned in a practical setting, and then go home and spread how wonderful the United States is. It was almost like this ambassador type of program as well, where the government wants people to come here and learn our culture as part of this so that they can share goodwill about the United States. The J-1, there's two types of J-1s. There's either this there's either this summer work and travel J-1, that's a 4-month visa. You usually see it more like when the college kids are home. Or there's this intern J-1 that we see a lot more in Florida than up here. But you can get it for 12 to 18 months, but it's essentially like a management training type program. They have to switch departments or switch roles every few months. Keep in mind, there is a place for both of them. A lot of our clients use both J1s and H2Bs. If I were a club manager, I would look at both, especially right now. I think the more that you're diversifying your staffing strategy, the better. So the pros and cons of both. H2Bs, you get really professional workers. When it works out well, what I hear from clients is that it raises the entire bar of their department. So like you bring in H2B line cooks, a lot of times it's going to improve the entire quality of your kitchen, right? It's kind of like people learn how they should be working. You can target specific roles and really fill those roles, but when you do that, one of the limitations of H2Bs is that you can't move them into other jobs. So if you have someone that's failing as a server because they can't do fine dining, you can't make them a busser for that year. Okay, that is a limitation. The numerical cap, which I'm going to talk about momentarily, is the biggest issue in this, and the one thing that is preventing me from saying that it's an amazing program that all of you should do. Because it is, if they got rid of that, it would be a real solution. And there's a lot of compliance obligations. You have to be really careful that you know that there's multiple government agencies that are part of that program. For J1s, there's not as much experience. Most of the time, this is going to be their first job by design, right? This is going to be their first hospitality job. There's limited obligations, though, for you as an employer. So less ways to get in trouble or less ways to get audited. There's also these cultural requirements. They were getting more strict before, but I think that's starting to shift. But it's funny, a lot of times you'll take them to like a baseball game or do a 4th of July day, and that might solve the problem, what you need to do. What's nice about J1s, though, too, is that a lot of the insurance is covered by the J1 sponsors. The way that J1s work is there's a middleman. So for H2Bs, it's H2B worker to club. It's tied directly. With J1s, you have J1 visa holder agency that facilitates the program, and then the Department of State. So this agency in the middle kind of does a lot of what you would be doing as a club. So if you decide to go down the J1 side, also one of the big benefits of the J1 is that the workers pay for it themselves rather than the employer. So if you go down the J1 side, basically what you do is you reach out to an agency and they walk you through it. If you need to go down the H2B side, reach out to a lawyer. I'm not saying that because I am one. I'm saying that it is so compliance heavy. Make sure you're working with a law firm on this one. But because it's employer driven, you need to understand some of the time frames. Okay. First of all, the process is a long one. So we just started a couple of weeks ago on summer 2022 petitions at our office. Okay, which basically is in reality going to be almost all of you, if not all of you. If you decide to do H2Bs, you need to start now. Okay. If you, for some reason, fall into another season, and I'll give you an example of this. One of our first clients was up in Massachusetts, where I live. When I started working with clubs, they have I always blank on this. They have curling at their club, and they needed a curling instructor. Even though primarily the club was very summer heavy, they had a winter need for the curling instructor. So they would have started their process on April 1st. But you need the 6 months. It is a very, very regulated process, and you can't catch up after a certain point. So just be careful on this in terms of the timing. If you leave, if you're interested in HGVs and you leave nothing from the next 30 minutes other than this, it's no way to start the process because everything else kind of flows from there. Okay, in terms of what we're seeing, these are the popular positions at hospitality. It's a lot of food and beverage positions. Cleaning is getting more and more popular. Front desk is also getting popular, as well as engineering. And golf course maintenance will always be popular. But these are what we're seeing. And then in terms of countries, the countries have to be designated, but there's a lot eligible. I would say the biggest ones are Jamaica and Mexico right now, partly because a lot of the travel restrictions that stem back to COVID and the Trump administration have prevented some of the others. Now, when I first started getting involved with clubs, there was this myth that only some clubs that were the bigger ones were able to do HGVs. That is not the case. We have some golf clubs that are small, and they might only apply for 5 people between 2 or 3 positions. You don't have to be a certain size to do HGVs. It's just if you have a need to fill for a season. You do not have to provide housing or daily transportation to the workers. This is another myth that I see. but it is very competitive to find workers, and if you, including H-2B workers, and if you can't answer the question of where people are going to live and how they're going to get to work, it's going to be hard to get the workers to want to come into you. So this is the biggest issue of H-2Bs. If this issue went away, I would say hands down, it becomes a budget issue, and with how hard all of you are working to find people and how much money you're spending on recruiting, I think H-2Bs would be a no-brainer for almost everyone in this room. The problem is, in the 90s, Congress limited how many H-2B visas were issued, and they said that from October 1st until March 31st, 33,000 visas were available. And then from April 1st until September 30th, another 33,000 are available. There's no fluctuation based on the economy, based on unemployment, based on where you are. And right at the end of Obama's presidency, and it had nothing to do with Obama, is Congress, they let this rule expire that exempted anyone that had held an H-2B visa in one of the last 3 years from counting against the cap. So what used to happen is if someone had been in the United States on an H-2B visa in one of the past 3 years, they didn't count against that 66,000. They let this law expire, and all of a sudden about 240,000 extra people counted against the 66,000 cap. Doesn't work. Now, the other issue with the cap is that it's not evenly split. Most industries that utilize the H-2B program and most organizations fall into that April 1st to September 30th cap. So what ends up happening is not only do they run out, but they run out the first day and do a random lottery. Based on what I'm seeing at my office right now with demand, I really think that this year in this random lottery it's going to be less than a 50% chance of getting people. Now, I will tell you, people like Joe at the NCA are working really hard to fix this, but as the congressman said when he was up here, there's a lot of other issues front and center. And the other issue is, as much as H-2Bs aren't about immigration the same way that other issues that relate to immigration are in the way that we think of it, it still has the word immigration in it, or visa in it, and it is a really hard thing to get through. So, if you're doing H-2Bs, or if you're thinking about it, you need to know that this cap exists, and that it's more likely than not, in my opinion, that you're not going to get the workers if you're bringing them in from outside the United States. The way around this issue is if you find in-country transfers. Okay, so if people are transferring to you from Florida, from Arizona, from other areas, and they're already here on an H-2B visa, they don't count against that 66,000 limit. Okay, so that's the good news, right? If they're already here, they have an H-2B, they don't count against that number. The bad news is that those people are also really hard to find, and it's a very competitive recruiting market. Okay, so keep that in mind when I talk about Seasonal Connect in about 90 seconds, but that's the biggest issue happening in terms of H-2Bs. In terms of where things are today, on the J1 side, there were a lot of Trump era issues that, for some reason, the Trump administration didn't like J1s. Biden, I really don't think cares. I don't think that J1s are going to be reformed in any way. I think there's some other issues on the horizon. The issue with J1s, though, is remember when I said that it's a cultural exchange visa? It's not a work visa the way the government defines it. And so when there are COVID delays and COVID backlogs at understaffed embassies and consulates, the J1s go lower in the pile. The biggest issue on J1s has been that it's been pretty impossible for them to get visa and consulate interviews. And so that's the problem with J1s right now, is that the program is in better shape than it's been, but the embassies and consulates are so backlogged that getting those people here is hard. Ooh, I don't know.
Sorry.
Sorry, press the wrong button. Okay, so in terms of H-2Bs, So in terms of H-2Bs, from a processing standpoint, those are in much better shape. They're going through. But again, we're starting to see a lot more embassy and consulate delays. And that makes sense where we are. Right now, where we are in the year is that a lot of organizations are bringing people in for the season, for winter season. So if you're gearing up for next summer and it's February, March, we're probably going to see these delays again because the embassies and consulates are understaffed. And if there's any other COVID issues going on, that's going to be a big issue as well. So in terms of preparing for next season, for your next season, if you're a winter organization, you definitely need to plan for next year now for the following year because the winter season cap was hit earlier than ever before. For summer though, what I would say in terms of planning for that is really trying to figure out where your workers going to come from. If I were in your shoes, I would really be trying to avoid them coming in from outside the country because I think that it's so difficult getting people into the country right now as it is, and putting your staffing plans in the hands of a lottery is terrifying with how hard it is to find people right now. Okay, so transitioning to Seasonal Connect. Seasonal Connect is something that I started with my partner Carly during the pandemic. It's been an idea that I had had for quite a while. It started as a tool to help with immigration. It is turned into a comprehensive staffing tool to find international and American workers. So as long as the sound works, I'm going to play a 60-second video because it's better than hearing my voice drone on about what this is. And it'll sum up what this is from a high-level standpoint. Okay, it doesn't work. So I'll tell you what it is separately. But before I do, the thing to know is that it is a completely separate tool from Pabian Law. So you don't have to be a Pabian Law client to use Seasonal Connect by design. I will tell you, Pabian Law, we want to stay pretty boutique. Customer service is really important to me. I want to be a tool even if you work with another lawyer, an agent, it doesn't matter. If you don't use H2Bs, we would love to have you. What it is, and it's really cool. It's been really rewarding just watching this thing come together. It has 5 main functions. Number 1 is that you can use it to find opposite season recruiting partners. So it's the first time that there's a database of other clubs, of other hospitality organizations all around the country. You can search them based on up to 100 different search criteria. So you can also use it for benchmarking. But one of the things that's come with that is that a lot of the members of Seasonal Connect have started to work with one another to transfer Americans back and forth. So it's also a tool for that. The second thing is that you can reach out to workers directly. Workers can log in, they can get different, they get their own unique login credentials. They're then sitting in this giant pot based on what they entered when they went in, and you can go search this giant pot of workers to recruit from them. You can also post jobs within Seasonal Connect where the workers can search for you and search for jobs. We also are helping find seasonal housing opportunities near your club. That's the third thing. Fourth is finding finding daily transportation options. And then the fifth thing is this community element. So taking this idea of what we're doing today, but putting it into a seasonal, basically a seasonal twist on it. And we do in-person events, we do virtual events multiple times a month. What we're trying to do is connect the community of employers so that they really get to know one another and can facilitate those recruiting tools. Where we are today is in a really fun spot. So we're still babies. This went live at the end of July, but what's fun about where we are today is that we're really able to see where it is now and how it's working. So right now we have about 275 employers in there and about 3,500 to 4,000 workers who have individually gone in. Very, very active community. People are placing loans. I heard one client called me the other day and she said that she got a standing ovation at her staff meeting because she found 25 dishwashers in 2 days. Another one found 45 housekeepers and something like 35 line cooks in 3 days. It's working. I think that what I've learned is that the employers and the workers have been looking for a platform like this and a way to find each other. And we are so excited because we built this to really be a solution for all of you. So if you want to sign up, you can go to seasonalconnect.com. I cannot emphasize this enough, and I'm the most biased person in the world on this. You should all sign up. It was literally made for clubs. I thought of this when I was speaking at a CMA World Conference, and I was just hearing people complain about what they didn't have access to. Carly and I wanted to pass along this discount. If you just enter that code, which is MGA21, you'll get 10% off the monthly fees for an entire year. But it's a really amazing tool. And if any of you want me to show you around the platform, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to do that. So I know my time is up. Huge thank you to all of you for listening and for having me. Yeah.
Hey, Keith, 1 second. Keith, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I guess I might have been misinformed, but I thought during the H2B process that it was a 3-year program, meaning that as you collect a group of individuals to be in transition in order for work, that as long as those were the same individuals, the process would hold true for a period of 3 years. But as you were saying, it is this, an annual process that must be done each year, going through it.
Yeah, so I get that question a lot. It's a good question. There's different rules for the employer side and for the worker side. Okay, so for the worker side, which is what you're referring to, workers are allowed to stay inside the United States for 3 years consecutively. They need to bounce back and forth between employers during that time, but the workers can stay for 3 years. After 3 years, they have to go home for 3 months, and then they can come back for 3 years, home for 3 months. That's the worker rule. The employer rule is that you can only apply for up to, right now, 10 months. It's actually 9 months, and then they keep extending in the spending bill to 10. But the employer can only apply for up to 10 months, and it always needs to mirror your season. So those workers that are bouncing back and forth, they're usually going, especially in the club world, let's say New York, New Jersey, Connecticut to Florida, and back and forth and back and forth. One of the big dangers to know about for all of you, especially in the staffing market, is that just because someone has an H-2B visa doesn't mean you get to cut the line. Doesn't mean you get to just skip to the end. You still have to go through this 6-month application process in order to employ that person, whether they're here on an H-2B working down in Florida or they're outside the United States. So again, the workers can stay for 3 years, but it's an annual program that you apply for. And just because they have an H-2B does not mean you can just bring them on. I get that question all the time right now because I know so many of you are just so desperate for staff. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.